Instructor.
Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramaddanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishno Vande Jagadgurum. Welcome everyone to our final Bhagavad Gita class of the semester. Final exams will be starting for you guys soon. And we're just starting on a new chapter, chapter 3. We finished the long chapter 2 previous time, where Bhagavan Krishna is urging Arjuna to fight in a battle, right? On the just side of the battle. Now we get to the beginning of chapter 3. It's very interesting. Arjuna already asked one question in chapter 2, which was what, roughly? What was the question? He asked one question to Krishna.
Qualities of the...
Yeah, of the?
Sthita
Prajna. What are the, and what kind of qualities?
External.
What are the external characteristics of a Sthita Prajna, of a person of established wisdom, or steady wisdom? Now in the beginning of chapter 3, we see Arjuna asking another question, this time more irritated than the previous one. And it's quite interesting. So let's read it and then okay, so I'll start with 3.1. Let me give a tiny bit of background on chapter 3. It's called Karma Yoga. See, at the end of every chapter, actually, there's a colophon. We didn't read it. Maybe I should, let me read the colophon for the last chapter. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Jana Samvade Sankhya Yogo Nama Dvitiyodhyayaha. The end of every chapter has what's called a colophon, and it's the same structure. Here ends this chapter. This is the second chapter. So the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's explaining what the Bhagavad Gita is. It has a number of beautiful descriptions. Number one, it's an Upanishad. This is very important. The Gita itself is an Upanishad, not literally, because it's not part of the Vedas. It's part of the which text? Gita is part of which text? Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is not part of the Vedas. And the Upanishads are part of the Vedas. So the Gita is not literally an Upanishad. But in what sense do you think that this colophon is describing the Gita as an Upanishad?
Philosophy.
It captures the philosophy of the Upanishads. It's the essence, the distilled essence. The Bhagavad Gita is the distilled essence of the highest spiritual teachings of the Upanishads. In that sense, the Bhagavad Gita itself can be considered another Upanishad. In fact, Swami Medhananda, he once made a very beautiful statement. He said that there's so many commentaries on the Upanishads. We have Shankaracharya, Ramakrishna, and a million others. What's the best commentary on the Upanishads? The Bhagavad Gita itself. It's a very nice comment, actually. We don't usually think of the Gita as a commentary on the Upanishads, but if we do, then it really, we can use the Bhagavad Gita as a hermeneutic lens or framework through which we can understand the Upanishads better, actually. Okay, well, there's a lot I could say about that, but I'm going to stop because this is just the colophon of chapter 2. Brahma Vidyayam, another descriptor of the Bhagavad Gita. It teaches Brahma Vidya, the highest knowledge of Brahman, of the supreme reality. But that's not all. Yoga Shastre. It's also a Yoga Shastra. It doesn't just teach us theoretical knowledge of the highest truth, the highest reality. It explains how we are able to attain, how we can go about, what are the means to attain this knowledge of the highest reality. That's called yoga. Yoga not in the modern sense of a downward dog. What is the Sanskrit term for downward dog? The one. Anyway, but downward dog is very commonly known in the West. That's why I'm saying downward dog. So anyway, so not that kind of yoga, not hatha yoga. Yoga in the sense of any kind of spiritual method or practice that leads to spiritual enlightenment or liberation. So it's both Brahma Vidya and Yoga Shastra. It teaches the highest knowledge and it teaches us the paths for attaining that highest knowledge. Hello. Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. This is a dialogue between who and who? Whom and whom? Yes. Bhagavan Krishna and Arjuna. And then in the colophon, in every chapter, comes the title of the chapter. Who exactly gave the title? Not clear. The colophon is most likely not part of the original Bhagavad Gita. It was added later. So we shouldn't obsess too much about the titles, these given titles found in the colophons of each chapter, because we might be, well, why is the title this and not that, or it's missing something important. But in any case, it's useful as a kind of general guide, but keeping in mind the caveat that this is not, most likely not part of the Bhagavad Gita text itself. The title given to this chapter is Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga. Why? Any guesses?
Sankhya is analysis, right?
Counting Sankhya.
Yeah, that's true. It literally means that. Enumeration. Okay, but how is it relevant to this chapter? That's my... Do you think this is an apt title for chapter 2? Let me put it that way.
I think in Shloka it says Sankhya.
Sankhya now, yeah, well, it does. There is the word Sankhya, and yoga is used a lot. But why is it called Sankhya Yoga? Actually, in a way, the beginning of chapter 2 or 3 has a lot of both Sankhya and yoga, in later chapters. But in any case, the main idea seems to be that in chapter 2, Bhagavan Krishna has been explaining that our true nature is not the body-mind complex, which is perishable, but the Atman. And he's constantly telling Arjuna to discriminate between his true nature as the Atman from the ephemeral body-mind complex. So that can be characterized broadly as a Sankhya kind of method, a Sankhya teaching in that sense, because it's based on discrimination between self and not self. What about yoga? I'm asking you a question. So think about what could be meant by yoga here in this pairing of Sankhya and yoga as a title to chapter 2, which all of us are experts in now because we've just spent several months discussing chapter 2.
This is the path that discriminate.
Oh, I see. You're taking, actually, that's interesting. Compound words in Sanskrit are a little bit tricky because they can be interpreted in different ways. Sankhya yoga can be interpreted depending on which kind of samasa, which kind of compound word it is. The way you interpret it, you're taking it as the yoga of Sankhya, right? There's another way of taking it. There's another kind of compound word where there are two, X and Y. Sankhya and yoga. And I almost certain that this is meant in the sense of Sankhya and yoga. So both Sankhya and yoga are taught in chapter 2. Not just Sankhya yoga, but also yoga. What is which yoga is being referred to? If we, yeah, which is, it's a little bit of a hard question. Buddhi yoga, but what is Buddhi yoga roughly, according at least to Sri Aurobindo? Even actually, most people agree.
Karma.
Yeah, very good. Exactly, it's karma yoga. This is important background for getting into chapter 3. That's why I'm not just doing this to trouble you. On the one hand, we have this path of discrimination between self and not self. To appreciate that, our true nature is the non-dual Atman, separate from the body-mind complex. But in chapter 2, Bhagavan Krishna is also teaching karma yoga again and again. What's the famous statement? Everybody should have memorized this by now in Sanskrit. You have the right to action, but not to the fruits thereof. Anybody? Excellent. Good. See, someone other than him is answering. I like that. Okay. Very good. Karmanyevadikaraste mapaleshu kadachana. You also have karma yoga teachings. You have Sankhya teachings in the sense of discrimination between self and not self. And you have teachings on karma yoga. So now, Nama, so Sankhya Yoga Nama, Dvitiyaha Adhyayaha, second chapter. Okay, so every colophon is structured like this. The title given to chapter 3, the chapter we're going to start discussing today, is Karma Yoga. And here again, this should be understood in the way that you took the previous one. That's why it's confusing. And of course, you're not, grammatically speaking, you could be correct. You could take it just as Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of Sankhya. So I'm not saying that you're 100% wrong. I just think that most people tend to take this to be Sankhya and yoga, I believe. And this one, the third title, Karma Yoga, has to be understood as the yoga of karma. Just because the whole chapter is really focused on this Karma Yoga discipline. Okay, so that's the title. So now let's begin with first shloka of chapter 3. Arjuna Uvacha. Okay, why don't we start with Atha Tritiyo Dhyayaha.
Her husband.
That means here begins the third chapter. Arjuna Uvacha.
It's a damn wedding.
Jayasi Chet
The venue seems hard.
Karmanaste Mata Buddhir
The rest of you. Also, bridal shops are
Janardana Tatkim Karmani Ghore Mam Niyojayasi Keshava. Good. So Anvaya. Please bear in mind a couple things about the Anvaya. I should have mentioned this earlier because I keep referring to the Anvaya, which is this rearrangement of the words. There's no one correct way to rearrange the words. They're multiple. I was just looking before today, waiting for you guys, that Tapasenandaji's edition also has an Anvaya. In many places, completely different from this one. It's not that one is right, the other is wrong. The idea is to put the words in an order that's more intuitive in order to grasp the meaning, but there isn't just one correct way to do it. There are multiple. But then added to this complication is another one, which is that apparently on my iPhone, the Anvaya is sometimes messed up. So I may have to check against who has Android phones here. You, both of you do. Yeah, okay, good. So okay. This one seems maybe okay, but let me know if it deviates on your phone. Arjuna Uvacha. Arjuna spoke as follows. What? Hey Janardana. Oh Krishna, Janardana. Buddhihi karmanaha jayasi te mata chet. Correct so far?
Yeah.
Okay. If, chet, if. So the word chet at the end. If your view, te mata, is what? That buddhi, intelligence, is superior, jayasi, superior to karma. After listening to chapter 2, Arjuna has decided this is what Krishna is teaching him. That buddhi is superior to karma. Intelligence, the path of discrimination, presumably, is what he has in mind here, is superior to the path of karma, action. Now the Anvaya, I really think is weird. So I want your comfort. Mine says Tat He Keshava. Is that really? Okay, so I think that's a mistake actually, because Tapasanji has a better one. He has Tat Kim, because Tat Kim actually means then why. That's more natural. So let me actually read Tapasanji's Anvaya on this one. If you guys know of a better app, you let me know. Okay. So Tapasanji says, Tat Kim Keshava, O Keshava. So then why, O Keshava? Ghore Karmani. In this terrible action. What's the terrible action he's referring to?
War.
Yes, engaging in battle. Mom, me, niyojasi, engage. Why are you pushing me, encouraging me telling me to engage in this terrible action? If you yourself have just told me that buddhi is superior to action, discrimination is greater than action. Okay? It's very interesting, this question. But he continues, he doesn't stop there. This is the next shloka shows his irritation, or not necessarily irritation, bewilderment. Okay, but any questions? We should, well, before questions, let's read these two because they're really of a piece. So let's read two and then we'll talk about both 1 and 2. Vyamishreneva
Vyamishreneva
vakyena
vakyena
buddhim
buddhim
mohayasiva me
mohayasiva me
tadekam vada
tadekam vada
nishchitya
nishchitya
yena shreyoham
shreyo
apnuyam.
apnuyam.
All right, this one, I hope it's more or less correct. The Anvaya, Vyamishrena iva vakyena. Me buddhim mohasi eva. You are as if, iva, as if, mohasi, bewildering me. Sometimes it can mean deluding. Here, deluding wouldn't be the right sense. So Sri Aurobindo says, bewildered. You are as if bewildering my me buddhim, my intelligence. Vyamishrena eva vakyena. With words, with speech, that is as if, iva again means as if, vyamishrena, confused and confusing. A hodgepodge. Like a khichuri. Tat ekam nishchitya vada. Yena aham shreha apnuyam. Tell me that one, give me that one teaching, tat ekam, that definitively tell me, nishchitya, definitively give me that teaching by which yena aham, I, shreya apnuyam, I can attain the very highest spiritual goal. Remember Shreya, Preya, this is Shreya, the highest spiritual goal. You've confused the heck out of me in the past 72, the previous 72 shlokas. Just tell me straight. What is it that I should do to attain the highest goal? Now, there's a lot to discuss here. But first, I'm curious actually, if you, in a lecture at USC, after listening to a bewildering lecture, if you raise your hand and said something like this, "Oh, professor, you're bewildering me with your confusing words." But before he does that, I mean, it's really a double, like a 1-2 punch. The first thing is putting words into Krishna's mouth. So this is what you told me for the past hour. It may not be right, but I'm just telling you. I'm telling you what you just taught me, and it's very confusing. And you're bewildering me. Why are you confusing me? I don't know how well that would go over in class. It could be a straw man. So this is first. What is a straw man? Does everyone know what a straw man is? Explain what a straw man is.
Like if somebody gives an argument, you take a weaker representation of it, which is not meant by the person, and you attack that and break that down and say that you're wrong.
Yes, this is very common in debate between two opponents.
Cheating, basically.
You'll often find that in a debate between X and Y, that X is misrepresenting Y's position and Y is misrepresenting X's position. And so there's no point in debate if you get the positions wrong from the beginning. So in Nyaya philosophy, they have terms for debate. Like there are certain conditions they lay down for having a proper debate. The very first condition, I really like this. This should be incorporated into American political debates as well. And the first step in engaging in a proper debate, you know what it is? Well, what would you imagine if you were asked to frame conditions for debate? What would be the first condition you would impose on two parties that want to engage in a debate?
Should agree what they are debating. Right? Something
like that, exactly. It's like that. The way that Nyaya puts it is, so X and Y are debating. The first step is for X, if X wants to start the debate, how does he start the debate, or she? X will have to will have to explain Y's view to the satisfaction of Y. First step. Then, after that's completed, Y has to do the same thing with respect to X. Y has to represent X's position to X's satisfaction. And if you say, well, what if Y is not satisfied with X's explanation? Then they keep working through. X will say, then what the heck are you saying, Y? And then Y will have to say it again. And then again, they might have to go through a number of rounds for X to represent Y's view correctly, and then for Y to represent X's view correctly. But ultimately, the first step, because otherwise debate is pointless. This is what the deep insight behind this first condition. I really think that we'd avoid a lot of name-calling, violence, all sorts of insanity if we just accurately represented what the opposing person's view is in the first place. Especially when emotions are involved, the first thing to go is accurate representation of your opponent's view. Because you lose your discrimination. So keep that in mind. That's useful for anything. If you ever want to argue with somebody, first thing you can say, you're turning me into a straw man. You're attacking a straw man. They're not actually criticizing me. They're criticizing some caricature of me, of my view. You see, it's a classic debate move, but it's also extremely foolish and leads to no good, in my opinion. So in any case, one question that comes up with regard to the first sloka is Arjuna making a straw man out of Bhagavan Krishna? With this first line, Jai si chet karmanaste mata buddhi janana. I'm telling you, O Krishna, what I've understood from what you've taught me in the last chapter is that you're teaching that buddhi is superior to karma. So this is a very interesting question, and I'm asking you now. Is this an accurate representation of Bhagavan Krishna's view? What do you think? It's a very interesting question. All of us have just studied all 72 shlokas of chapter 2. Did we come away with feeling confused? Or is everything crystal clear? Or are we somewhere in between Arjuna's total frustration and total clarity? What? Why so shy? How did you find the last chapter? Was it confusing? You find yourself sympathetic with Arjuna? Yes. Why?
Because I think Krishna is on both the sides. Once he says, yes, okay, go through this path. And he's like, but you can also do this. You have to decide what's right and what's correct for the situation. So of course, when Arjuna is already so stressed that he has to fight a battle, it is confusing. Even we think like, oh yeah, maybe he should do karma. But then later we are like, no, you should go the other way. So
good. Okay. Yeah. So that you feel that Arjuna is justified in feeling confused by the previous chapter. Anyone else?
I think it's because of Sthita Prajna. He got confused.
Why?
Maybe he thought that, all those qualities were all internal, something to do with him, give up desires and all that. So he doesn't see how acting in a war is going to help him do that. Yeah, like extra.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. You're saying that because Arjuna asked that question in the last chapter about the external characteristics of a Sthita Prajna, an enlightened being. And Krishna says there are no external characteristics, they're all internal. You have to renounce all desires, etc., etc. And you're saying that Arjuna is having a hard time figuring out how that's relevant to this issue of whether he should fight in the war or not, right?
Go to a cave.
Yeah, why not go to a cave and meditate in the Atman and try to renounce all my desires? How is fighting in the war going to help me? And how do we reconcile all of Bhagavan Krishna's teachings on our true nature as the Atman with his teachings on karma yoga? Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu gadachana. There's another thing. He says it. He says you have the rights to duty, to doing your duty, action. You don't have the right to the fruits thereof. That's teaching about karma yoga. And then there are a million shlokas about, not a million, I'm exaggerating, but many shlokas on the need to discriminate between your true self and your superficial self, the body-mind complex, which never, and it's only the body-mind complex which can be killed and which can kill, but not the deeper Atman, right? But what is the connection between these two things? Let's say I engage in karma yoga. Will I be able to realize my Atman? Does Krishna talk about that anywhere? So I think there's some validity to Arjuna's confusion. Whether you should have quite put it in this way, a question. Okay, so okay, but now let's come back to this first line of Shloka 1. Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhi janadana. if your view, O Krishna, is that buddhi is superior to karma, so now what do you think he means by this? Where do we think that Krishna ever says this anywhere in chapter 2? That buddhi is superior to karma? And if not, why do you think Arjuna is led to think that this is what Bhagavan Krishna taught? Any ideas? There's no easy answer to this, by the way. I like asking tricky questions. The benefit of tricky questions is that there's no right answer. So you can't give too stupid an answer. Anyone want to try? Venture? What makes Arjuna think that what Bhagavan Krishna taught in chapter 2 is that buddhi is superior to karma? In fact, different commentators have different interpretations of this, or different answers to the question I'm asking. That's why before I dive in, I thought it would be nice to hear from you a little bit. Anyone? No.
I think
Yes.
is it related to, there was one shloka which said, how you sit, how that person walks, how that person talks. I
Yeah.
don't remember. There were
Yeah.
3 things in that.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure if it says that. So he's trying to say that you should do your karma and
Yeah.
not like wait for the fruits, or
Yeah.
not wait, but expect the fruits.
Yeah.
But also simultaneously he connects to how a person basically behaves, like how does he sit, or how does he walk, or how does he talk.
Who are you talking about, Krishna or Arjuna? Whom are you talking about now, Krishna or Arjuna?
Krishna.
Okay, Krishna. Yeah.
So he says you should not basically look on those characteristics or external things and focus on internal.
Correct.
As Atman.
Correct.
So those things go conflict.
Oh, I see. Maybe Arjuna, this is Arjuna's understanding of Bhagavan Krishna's answer to his question about the Sthita Prajna Lakshana. Yeah. That's interesting. This seems to be maybe your drift as well, to some extent. Krishna, I'm asking you about how an enlightened person behaves, acts in this world, walks, talks, sits, all these things. And instead of giving me a direct answer and explaining what that enlightened person's actions are like, all of your explanations are internal. And in that case, shouldn't I be engaging in meditation and discrimination, contemplation, rather than engaging in action? So that's a very nice, yeah, both of you, that's an interesting idea. Yeah. Archana Bundi, welcome. This is your first time in the class. She's online and she has her hand raised. So please go ahead and, do you have a question about this or an answer to my question maybe? Yes, go ahead. I think you need to unmute yourself first because all I can see is I'm not a lip reader. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I'm still trying to read your lips, but I can't hear you.
All right, let's.
Oh no. Okay. What you can do is type it in the. Is it on my end? On our end?
Second.
Hold on. Now try, Archana.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it was my fault.
I think what I understand is Shri Krishna is trying to tell Arjun to use his wisdom to delineate between right and wrong and engage in action. And Arjun is thinking that he's stressing on Gyan so much, then why is he asking me to go and act? He's asking me to use all my wisdom, so are you wanting me to just, so I think that's where his confusion is coming from. Just tell me to do one or the other.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the students here are also saying, the same thing. They're saying that Arjuna is confused because most of chapter 2 is taken up with jnana, essentially. Know the Atman, know your true self, know your true self, know your true self. And then suddenly it throws in this line about karma yoga. Therefore, you should do your duty. We're just fighting in a terrible, bloody battle where you kill your own kith and kin and loved ones and gurus. And so Arjuna feels a real discord or disjunct between these two things. Thank you, Arjuna. Yeah.
Like in the beginning, said like to control your senses in order to realize the Atman. So that also kind of relates to the jnana. Yoga.
Which yoga, sorry?
Buddhi yoga.
Buddhi yoga. Well, Buddhi yoga, the term is a little bit tricky. Buddhi Yoga was used in chapter 2, but it's not used in the sense, most likely it's not used in the sense of Sankhya, in the sense of discrimination. There's a discriminative element in it. There's an element of discrimination, but it also involves Karma Yoga. So that's why Sri Aurobindo translates Buddhi Yoga as yoga of the intelligent will. Intelligent is the Buddhi part of it, but it's intelligent will because the way that Bhagavan Krishna explains Buddhi Yoga is in terms of engaging in actions without coveting the fruits of the actions. But your general point, I think, is right. And I think, again, you're going in the same direction as these others. So all of you are, I think, moving in the same direction. I think that's pretty plausible. So that's more or less what these, at least some of the commentators say. Okay, so now let's start getting into how some of these commentators have interpreted Arjuna's bewildered question and complaint. Shlokas 1 and 2 of chapter 3. Let's begin, as we often do, with Shankara. Shankara, he's very happy with this first line of Arjuna's, and he says, yes, Arjuna is totally right here. But how does he interpret this? This is very interesting. Let me remind you again of Shankara's Advaita Vedanta philosophy, the basic framework, which is that only one yoga, one spiritual path leads directly to liberation. What is that? Which yoga? Jnana Yoga. What about Karma Yoga for Shankara? Does he say it's useless, or does he say it has some value? And if so, what value does it have?
Prerequisite.
What? Say it, give a full sentence rather than just shouting
you should
random.
do that first to start doing it. Like
it's not quite precise enough. What's the purpose? Okay, let's say, so you're, yes, very good, exactly. First engage in Karma Yoga. Why? With what aim? With the aim of purifying the mind and heart. And then what happens once I have a purified mind, according to Shankara's school?
Then you should do bhakti.
No.
For concentration.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it depends on, there's actually, it gets really complicated because the post-Shankara Advaitins even make a further distinction between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga and say that Karma Yoga is for Chitta Shuddhi, Bhakti Yoga is for concentration. Actually, if you study Shankara's commentaries, it's not as cut and dried as that. And part of the reason is, interestingly, because you're going to find as you continue to read the Bhagavad Gita, Karma Yoga is not so easily separated from Bhakti Yoga. There's a very, very strong bhakti element in Karma Yoga. One of the shlokas that's coming up in chapter 3, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashi nirmamo bhutva yuthyasvavyatachvada, which means having surrendered, given up all your actions to me, Mai, Bhagavan Krishna. Sanyasya adhyatma chetasa. So in any case, but the idea is, there's the way that Krishna explains Karma Yoga in the Gita has a bhakti element in it. Anyway, this will take me in a different direction, but coming back to your, so, okay. But the general, simplest way to explain Shankara's view is, it's through Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga that we can attain purity of mind and ultimately concentration of mind, which are prerequisites for what? For practicing the path of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, self-inquiry, whatever you want to call it, discrimination between self and not self. So like a bachelor's degree is a prerequisite for a master's degree, and then the master's is a prerequisite for a PhD, right? Like that. Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are prerequisites to practice Jnana Yoga, which alone leads to the highest goal of liberation. This is Shankara's framework. Keep this in mind. How does Shankara now interpret Arjuna's question? He says, Arjuna's right. Arjuna is right in taking this to be Krishna's view in the previous chapter. But how does he understand Jayasi Chet Karmanaste Mata Buddhi Janadana? Shankara takes this to mean that Arjuna understands Bhagavan Krishna to be saying that the path of knowledge, Buddhi here Buddhi means path of knowledge, is superior to the path of karma. And Shankara says, that's correct. Jnana Yoga is superior to karma. And Arjuna is rightly confused if Krishna is saying again and again that the path of knowledge is superior to the path of karma, why in the world is he telling me to fight in this war? Why not tell me to engage in Jnana Yoga? It's a very natural question that should come up. This is Shankara's interpretation. Do you find it plausible? Why or why not? Maybe we can't say based on the first two shlokas. we should really read on. But in any case, if you have any initial thoughts about whether you find it plausible, let me know before we discuss other interpretations of the same question. No? Okay. Keep it in mind. Let's keep this as a kind of, and of course, it'll be difficult to keep it in mind for several weeks. Then this is the end of our semester. But in any case, I'll probably bring it up when in the next class. I'll kind of review this again. I'll come to this. I'll revisit this question. Is Shankara's understanding of Arjuna's representation of Krishna's teachings in chapter 2 accurate? Why or why not? This is the question. One very key piece of data that's necessary for answering the question is in the subsequent shlokas of this chapter. And how many shlokas do we have here? It's fairly long, but not so long. 43 shlokas. Does Krishna suggest anywhere that Karma Yoga is only a feeder discipline for Jnana Yoga? Does he suggest anywhere that the path of selfless action is just a prerequisite for the higher practice of knowledge? Or does Krishna suggest something otherwise? So that's the open question, which it'll require us to go into the subsequent shlokas to really, and the whole Gita, in fact. If we want to be really rigorous, you can't take even one chapter. You have to look at all 18 chapters. Okay? But it's a very important question to ask. But this is Shankara's interpretation, and he's going to consistently interpret all of chapter 3 in this way. You're going to see that he interprets shloka 3 and 4 and 5 along the same lines, always bringing in adhikari bheda. Shankara's basic claim is Arjuna is an inferior spiritual aspirant. Oh, actually, let me not jump the gun on it. This is basically Krishna's answer to Arjuna according to Shankara. It's like, sorry if I confuse you, but what I didn't tell you, but which I should now tell you. Sorry to tell you this. And don't be offended, don't be hurt by this, but you're only eligible for Karma Yoga because you're an inferior spiritual aspirant. This is Shankara's understanding of Bhagavan Krishna's answer, or at least one part of Krishna's answer. Okay, we are not there yet. I'm jumping the gun. Okay, but so this is Shankara's interpretation of Arjuna's question and the source of Arjuna's confusion. Do you understand Shankara's interpretation? More or less. Yeah? Why is Arjuna confused according to Shankara? Because he understands Krishna as telling him again and again to fight in this war and engage in Karma Yoga. But at the same time, Bhagavan Krishna is saying that the highest goal is to realize your true nature as the Atman. And there doesn't seem to be any connection between doing Karma Yoga or at least any direct connection between doing Karma Yoga and gaining knowledge of the Atman. This is Shankara's interpretation. Now, how about Swami Tapasanandaji? He has an interesting take on this. Let me read it to you. For those of you who have this edition, it's page 104, note number 1. Tapasanandaji says the following: Arjuna's doubt would probably arise in the mind of every reader of the Gita after going through the second chapter. So he's also like the rest of us, feeling that he's at least partly justified in feeling confused after that second chapter. Then Swami Tapasanandaji continues, the Lord is trying to prompt Arjuna to action as against his desire to give up an active life and become a pacifist and an ascetic. He's going back to chapter 1, actually, where Arjuna is saying, I think it was chapter 1, I may as well it's better to be a beggar begging for alms than to engage in this terrible warfare where I'll be killing my own kith and kin and my loved ones. But beyond mentioning Karma Yoga, see that brief mention, Karmanyevadikaraste mav, and a few other small mentions like that. But beyond mentioning Karma Yoga and offering some criticism of the Vedic ritualism, remember those shlokas? Swarga para janma karma palakriya. You know, Bhagavan Krishna has a few shlokas criticizing Vedic ritualism. That's what Tapasanji is referring to. But beyond mentioning karma yoga and offering some criticism of the Vedic ritualism, he gives no exposition of that theme. What theme? Karma yoga. But speaks all through about the philosophy of the Atman. This is also what you guys are saying, right? About control of the senses, as you mentioned. And the self-satisfied state of a man of steady wisdom, as both of you mentioned, Sthita Prajna. All this looks irrelevant and confusing if the object of the earlier discourse is to prompt Arjuna to action. Hence Arjuna's query. So, great minds think alike. You guys are very much on the right track here. So this is Tapasanji's explanation. I think it's quite nice. Sri Aurobindo basically argues along the same lines, but adds something really interesting. So I just wanted to mention this little added dimension to Sri Aurobindo's interpretation of shlokas 1 and 2. Let me read his commentary now. Sri Aurobindo says, the yoga of the intelligent will, this is his translation of the Sanskrit what? I just told you 5 minutes ago. The yoga of the intelligent will. Buddhi yoga, exactly. The yoga of the intelligent will, in other words, Buddhi yoga, and its culmination in the Brahmic status. He's referring to the last shloka of the previous chapter, Esha Brahmi Sthitihi Patha, which occupies all the close of the second chapter, contains the seed of much of the teaching of the Gita, of the whole Gita, all 18 chapters. Its doctrine of desireless works, of equality, samatvam yoga uchyate, of the rejection of outward renunciation. This is interesting. And it's one of the keynotes of Sri Aurobindo's commentary on the Gita. Bhagavan Krishna is not so much emphasizing external renunciation so much as an internal renunciation of desire. Of devotion to the divine, that's also hinted at in chapter 2. I've been harping on this many, many times. What's the hint of bhakti in chapter 2? You should have memorized. Tiny little phrase in Sanskrit. You should all memorize this. Anybody? No. I'm going to say one more time, but keep guessing until I get to it. Shloka 61 of chapter 2, there's a tiny little phrase, matparaha. Matparaha. Repeat after me twice, matparaha. One more time. Yes. Matparaha. The first hint of bhakti in the Bhagavad Gita is matparaha in Shloka 61 of chapter 2. I think this is what Sri Aurobindo is referring to when he says devotion to the divine. You should be intent on me, thinking of me, with your mind concentrated on me. That's matparaha. Then Sri Aurobindo says, but as yet, all this is slight and obscure, as we're all saying and somewhat complaining. Okay. What is most strongly emphasized as yet is the withdrawal of the will from the ordinary motive of human activities, desire. Kama, remember, prajahati yada kaman sarvan patamanogatanat. Again and again, in answer to Arjuna's question from the previous chapter, Krishna is saying, you have to renounce desire, get rid of all desires. This is what Sri Aurobindo is talking about. Okay, so desire. Okay, the withdrawal of the will from the ordinary motive of human activities, desire, from man's normal temperament of sense-seeking thought and will with its passions and ignorance, and from its customary habit of troubled, many-branching ideas, bahushaka hyanantascha, and wishes to the desireless calm unity and passionless serenity of the Brahmic poise. So much Arjuna has understood. Then he says something interesting. He is not unfamiliar with all this. It is the substance of the current teaching, current meaning not now, but at that time, which points man to the path of knowledge, jnana yoga, or buddhi, or sankhya. There are different terms for this used. Okay, not buddhi yoga, which is karma yoga. Please don't get confused. But buddhi in the sense that Arjuna is using it in Shloka 1 of chapter 3. Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhit janatana. That buddhi here is not buddhi yoga. Buddhi, the path of knowledge, exactly. Yeah. Knowledge of the Atman as distinct from the body-mind complex. Yeah. It is the substance of the current teaching which points man to the path of knowledge and to the renunciation of life and works as his way of perfection. One of the points that Sri Aurobindo makes here, and of course it's difficult to kind of substantiate these claims historically because we don't have much in the way of historical records. But Sri Aurobindo thinks, and I think it's fairly plausible, that at the time of the Gita, the assumption was that to engage in true spiritual practice, to be a really hardcore spiritual practitioner, you have to give up actions, external actions. You should be meditating in a cave. That seemed to be the common view. One piece of evidence in favor of this historical assumption is that one of the most ancient, if not the most ancient, school of Indian philosophy, which well preceded the Gita, was Sankhya. And Sankhya really does teach external renunciation of action and strongly emphasizes the path of discrimination between self and not self. So there's some historical evidence for this idea. So that was the idea that was current, prevalent, seems to have been prevalent during Bhagavan Krishna's time when he's giving this teaching to Arjuna. And now what Sri Aurobindo is saying is Krishna is teaching something different. He's breaking with that prevailing view by emphasizing karma yoga and saying even through karma yoga you can attain the highest. So let me just finish off Sri Aurobindo's commentary here. Krishna seems quite to admit the orthodox philosophic doctrine when he says that works are far inferior to the yoga of the intelligence. This is the interesting suggestion. Chapter 2, Shloka 49. Durena hyavaram karma buddhyoga dhananjaya. Bhagavan Krishna is telling Arjuna, karma is far inferior to durena hi avaram karma buddhyogad. Far inferior to buddhi yoga. Karma is far inferior to buddhi yoga. This is the statement. We come back to this issue of what exactly is buddhi yoga. Based on the context of chapter 2, the surrounding shlokas, I think it's pretty clear that buddhi yoga is a kind of karma yoga. So if we take buddhi yoga to mean karma yoga, then what Krishna is saying is karma is no doubt far inferior to karma yoga. So what Bhagavan Krishna is emphasizing in Shloka 49 is the difference between mere karma and the yoga of karma, or karma done as a yoga, karma done as worship of the divine, karma done without coveting, without being attached to the fruits of one's actions, without being attached to the work itself. That's at least Sri Aurobindo's interpretation of 49 of chapter 2. But now Sri Aurobindo is saying something interesting. He's saying that maybe Arjuna didn't understand it properly, Bhagavan Krishna's teaching, and that he misunderstood Bhagavan Krishna to be arguing that buddhi understood as Sankhya yoga, Sankhya, the path of Sankhya, discrimination, is superior to the path of karma, karma yoga. It's a little bit complicated, but do you follow that basic? Sri Aurobindo's own interpretation of Shloka 49 of chapter 2 is that buddhi yoga equals karma yoga. And Krishna is just saying, don't think that karma is the same thing as karma yoga. I'm engaging in action, therefore it's automatically karma yoga. No, karma yoga is an achievement. You can only do karma yoga. You can only transform karma into karma yoga through intense spiritual practice. By thinking of God constantly, by doing the work you're doing as a worship of God, by trying not to get attached to the fruits of your actions. So that's how Sri Aurobindo interprets Shloka 49. But he thinks that Arjuna might have misinterpreted the shloka to mean, hey, you're saying in this shloka that the path of knowledge is the path of discrimination, knowledge is superior to the path of selfless action. But again, I'm not saying that Sri Aurobindo's interpretation is conflicts with Tapasanandi's or with what you're saying. I think he agrees with that too. That's also clear from what I just read. And let me just finish what he says. So, and yet works are insisted upon as part of the yoga. See, this is where he's adding a further nuance. Sri Aurobindo is famous for nuance and adding subtlety upon subtlety. So now Sri Aurobindo is saying, and yet works are insisted upon as part of the yoga of the intelligence. He's noting the fact that when Bhagavan Krishna is explaining Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of the intelligent will, that he's explaining it in terms of Karma Yoga, not getting attached to the fruits of your actions, etc., etc. So that there seems to be in the teaching a radical inconsistency. He's also, Sri Aurobindo is also sympathizing with Arjuna here, saying, no wonder Arjuna is confused. We're also confused. It is an answer to this objection that the Gita begins at once to develop more clearly its positive and imperative doctrine of works. So that's why this chapter is entitled Karma Yoga. Because now, finally, in response to Arjuna's bewildered question and confusion and complaint, Ramakrishna says, okay, I think now is the time then to explain very clearly to you the doctrine of Karma Yoga. And why, in spite of the fact that the action that I'm asking you to wage is a terrible one, because it's going to involve a lot of bloodshed. And in spite of the fact that the goal of all spiritual practice is the realization of the Atman, in spite of all that, I want you to engage in Karma Yoga. The missing link here, which we'll get to, but let me anticipate just because, what time is it now? 7:27. We'll conclude with a meditation and end soon. But the way that Sri Aurobindo sees this is that Krishna's answer finally is that because it's through Karma Yoga that you will realize the supreme goal of life, which is realization of your true nature as the Atman and realization of God. And that Karma Yoga is not just an indirect path for Chitta Shuddhi, for purification of mind, but can take you all the way to the highest goal. This is Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. Shankara will not agree. And I want each of you to think for yourselves about which one, if either. Maybe you want to accept a third interpretation or a fourth interpretation, or if there's so many interpretations of the Gita, but I'm just presenting you a few of them, and I want you to use your own brains. Okay. I think we spent the whole class just discussing Arjuna's question, but it's interesting, right? So I would recommend that you not take tips from Arjuna on how to ask questions to your professors at USC. That might get you in trouble. You're confusing the heck out of me, oh professor. But anyway, see how bold he was. I appreciate that. It shows a kind of intimacy, that there was a real friendship between Krishna and Arjuna. It's like, it reminds me of the way that Naren, who at the age of 18 or 19, who would go on to become Swami Vivekananda, how he would talk to Sri Ramakrishna. This young kid going to see this Paramahamsa who's decades older than him, and obviously highly revered and everybody else in the room is not saying anything, more or less, because they're so in awe of this great spiritual personage. Naren, so Sri Ramakrishna is talking about how, I just had a vision of Divine Mother. I was just talking to her. Naren says, these are all hallucinations. You're a megalomaniac. He used fancy words because he was taught by English professors at Scottish Church College, and he studied philosophy. And so he's using the latest terminology to refute Sri Ramakrishna's visions. So you're a megalomaniac. He used the word megalomaniac. You're a megalomaniac. These are hallucinations. How do you know they're not hallucinations? And just imagine the gumption of this guy, of this young kid, this teenager, challenging this saint. So anyway, Swami Vivekananda has a good legal precedent in Arjuna's questioning of Krishna. He can say, I'm not the first to do this. Arjuna is asking Krishna in the same borderline rude way. Okay. I think we should probably conclude on just the questions, because there's going to be a long gap. There's still an open question of whether we should continue this course through the summer or not. We'll confirm that hopefully within the next week or so, and then I'll get back to you, and we'll inform Medha will inform people who are attending online whether we'll be continuing through the summer semester or whether we will start up again in the fall semester. But in any case, there's going to be a gap of at least a few weeks, and so I think this is actually a fitting note to stop on: confusion. I think confusion is good. I think it's underrated. Confusion is underrated because confusion is what's most dangerous is thinking you've understood something, but actually not understanding it properly. That's why there's another way of putting this. This is like the worst kind of person is the sort of pseudo-intellectual. The true intellectual is a person who really has knowledge. He understands, he or she understands, has a depth of knowledge. The ignorant person is also safe. The ignorant person is good. Why? Because that person knows he or she is ignorant. I honestly don't know what you're saying. That's also okay. Then you can work with that. Okay, then let me try to remove your ignorance by explaining in a different way the same idea. But the people who think they know but don't know, they're hopeless. They've convinced themselves and they're trying to convince others that, no, I know exactly what you mean. And then they say the opposite. This is the worst situation. So the first step in gaining clarity is admitting that you're confused. So we're going to end on this confused note, ending on Shloka 2 of chapter 3. And we will see how Bhagavan Krishna begins to resolve Arjuna's confusions. I say begins to resolve because in chapter 5, he asks another bewildered question. Chapter 5, 3 chapters from now, or 2 chapters, he's not satisfied. Arjuna asks another question. Wait a minute, I'm still confused. Because again and again, you seem to be talking about the path of knowledge and then talking about the path of karma. I still don't understand. So it's not that Bhagavan Krishna is going to give a simple knockdown answer right off the bat in chapter 3. There'll be more confusion, but fruitful confusion. Let's think of this as productive, fruitful confusion. I think all of you as students will appreciate fruitful confusion. Right? Okay. So let's do a brief meditation. Gently close your eyes. Sit in a comfortable posture. Observe your breath as you inhale. And as you exhale, if you need something to visualize, you can focus your attention on the tip of your nostrils where the breath goes in and out. Be aware of the breath as you inhale and as you exhale. You find the mind wandering, bring it back gently to the breath. Now visualize the divine light in your heart and concentrate on this divine light, which is your true nature, your spiritual eternal nature. Please chant with me. Om. 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 Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, see you everyone in a few weeks. As I said, date to be determined next class, but we'll figure it out soon. Thank you.